creeps, and welcome to the That Sick podcast, where we look at the intersection of horror movies, horror games, and the horror of existence as two sick little freaks obsessed with the genre and the way it connects across mediums. My name is Ash, and this is my co-host Josh, and today it is Requiem for the Dead, Nightmare for the Living. It's Resident Evil Requiem, baby!
Ooh, I don't think you're ever going to get a harder title or tagline than that. It's unbelievable. Yeah. Ever since I heard that, I knew this game was going to be good. Not that I ever had any doubts, Ash Millman, as a diehard Resident Evil fan. But it's just such a sick title. It's got such a sick aesthetic. There's a sick concept, and that's why we're doing it on That's Sick, because it all works very well.
Yes, we've played it and now we're requieming it, which I'm really excited about because this is our first foray into actually using horror games as our main topic as well. Even though the Resident Evil franchise is so big, we shall be sticking neatly to Requiem as a game just because there's so many other options that we could fumble into, like we did with Bring Her Back and Talk to Me. That was kind of about the Philippou brothers in general, whereas I think this is more about like, it's Requiem. It's Requiem, baby. I don't know, that's the tagline now. It's Requiem, baby.
It gives us a nice excuse to do individual episodes on every other Resident Evil game and piece of media ever made as well. Obviously, we will be referencing here and there a couple of other titles, but yeah, I think this game's so big and so interesting in and of itself that we're going to keep it nice and self-contained to this one release. I played it back when it came out, and I cannot wait to get back to it because I feel like there's so many tasty little morsels and layers in there. Ash, this is such a huge game. Where do you even want to start?
I've got a prologue section in my notes. Again, a special coined term made for this podcast specifically that's never appeared in films or games before. And basically all I've written in it is part of the mainline Resident Evil series following Leon S. Kennedy's storyline on from games 2, 4, and 6. I haven't actually played Resident Evil 6, so like I had to look this up and I was like, oh, he's in another game? That's nice for him. But yeah, 5 and 6 are the two that I just haven't played because they're super action heavy ones. But yeah, that kind of idea of Leon building on from those games and coming into this as Mr. Action Man Special Agent Leon Kennedy is really, really nice, especially after 4 Remake is one of the most recent ones as well that we've had in the mainline series. Did you know that this is the 30th game from the wider franchise? If we include the remakes, all of the spin-offs, everything, this is from the run. It's from Wikipedia. I'm going to be honest. I counted the games on the Wikipedia page and was like, this is the 30th one.
There's a lot of games in there, and there's a lot of games with Leon Kennedy in, and just hit the microphone there. It's an interesting one, Requiem, because with that lineage that it has, with all of these titles that are leading up to it, like you mentioned, when it comes to Leon Kennedy's story in it, it's very much a continuation that has been decades in the making. You know, if you played the original Resident Evil 2 and then, like you said, 4 and 6 and went into this game, you have that thread. If you played the remakes of 2 and 4, you still have that thread going into this. So narratively, it's paying off that character arc and that, you know, initial setting and the origin of the franchise in many ways, but mechanically and from a gameplay perspective, it also very much pays off the foundations that were established by Resident Evil 7 and then kind of furthered in Resident Evil 8 with the more first-person horror-heavy sections that are more akin to something like Amnesia or, you know, just one of those kind of first-person horror first titles. So it's such a big game. It's an ambitious game, as was Resident Evil 6. That was another title where it was like, we're going to do everything. We're bringing back Leon. We're bringing back Chris. We're having new characters. We've got the action. We've got the horror. We've got Kung Fu Mayhem in there. And it didn't quite work. In Requiem, they managed to do 2 very different styles of horror, the more focused first-person horror and the more action-focused horror of Leon's sections. But they do it so much better. They weave it together in a much more cohesive way. And it's quite impressive that they managed to pull that off, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the 2 very separate styles of gameplay I loved. As somebody who's very into Resident Evil 7, this game is directed by Koshi Nakanishi as well, who's the same director as Resident Evil 7, and also Resident Evil Revelations is one of the directors on that as well. But yeah, I think that kind of you've got that type of gameplay in there to feed people like me, and then the Leon action heavy side where I really enjoy it, and I really like the way that it contrasts. Like, I think it makes the Grace sections feel even more powerful as our brand new character to the franchise, and then kind of relying on the old school Leon stuff. Like the vibe between the two is so fun, and just, yeah, even more Moorish, because then you've got Leon with a chainsaw and you've got Grace being like, oh no, I must run, which I think is super interesting as well. But what we should do before we carry on is do a roundup of the plot.
Would you like to? You know what? I'm like really jet lagged. I've only just got back. Do you want to take this one, Ash? Do you want me? I've been on holiday. I've been to the US of A, the United States, where Raccoon City is from. I've been doing some first-hand research into the T virus and Resident Evil. Do you want me to do it? Do you want to do it?
I have written notes because this is such a sprawling plot that I'm kind of interested to see how you would do it off the dome.
No, I thought that was going so well. I thought I'd be completely saved. Okay, I'll try it, and you can fill in the blanks. Okay, this is a game set decades, 20 years after the events of Resident Evil 2, which, if you don't know, was a zombie outbreak caused by the T-virus in a city called Raccoon City. The city was destroyed to contain the virus that was made by a company called Umbrella. And 20 years later, we pick up with one of the survivors, Leon S. Kennedy, because the few survivors of that event are turning up dead. They're being killed by something or someone. We soon come to understand that Leon has essentially a latent version of the T-virus within him that has now started to spring to the fore and is killing him, so he's got these horrible black veins all over him. This is slowly taking over him and the other survivors of Raccoon City. Meanwhile, we are introduced to our other lead protagonist, Grace Ashcroft, who is not a survivor necessarily. Oh no, Ashcroft. I'm right with that one, right? Am I right, Grace Ashcroft? Yeah, I'm right.
Grace Ashcroft. She's daughter of Alicia Ashcroft.
I saw your face change, and I was like, have I got it wrong already? Am I already going off the deep end? So we have Grace Ashcroft. I'm just stressing
you out in the background, being like, how can I test him here?
You're giving me the evils. Grace Ashcroft, like you said, daughter of Alyssa Ashcroft, who was a survivor from Raccoon City from a game called Resident Evil Outbreak, which was a spin-off. We find out that Grace's mother was killed. She was murderized in a hotel for mysterious reasons. And we pick up as Grace, who is now in the FBI, who has, she's on a mission to investigate another murder that happened in the exact same hotel, which brings back memories for her. She's ultimately kidnapped by a snake-like freak called Victor Gideon, who thinks she's part of a fella called Oswell Spencer, who was the founder of the Umbrella Corporation. He thinks she's an integral part of his plans for this thing called Elpis, which is a kind of a rabbit's foot. If that's a Mission Impossible 3 reference, I forgot what the thing's actually called. It's a rabbit's foot sort of situation where you spend the entire game not knowing what Elpis is or what it's supposed to do. You just know that it's important. We later find out that it's being kept in a lab that is underneath the remains of Raccoon City. So we play as Grace as she encounters some of Gideon's experiments and what appears to be a clone of herself called Emily. You spend these sections as Grace trapped in this hospital, Gideon's hospital, trying to get Emily out. You ultimately do with the help of Leon, but Emily dies. She gets shot, and you get taken by Gideon, and then we swap to Leon, who has to go back to Raccoon City to find the laboratory, to find Elpis, to take down the bad guys, including another clone, we come to realize, of a former villain called Albert Wesker, who in this game is called Nero. You are chasing these guys down. No. I'm wrong? Wrong.
Zeno.
Explain. Zeno. I was so close. Nero is from Devil May Cry. It's very anime, very similar. Called Zeno. You're chasing those two down as Leon S. Kennedy. You ultimately save Grace, and Grace discovers that, one, she's not actually a clone. And 2, Elpis is not this super bioweapon that Gideon and Xeno are looking for, but actually it's a complete antiviral cure for all bioweapons, and you are able to release that. You are able to cure Leon. Gideon gets shot to bits. Xeno gets his head chopped off, and it turns out that after all of this, Emily was still alive because Leon didn't shoot any of her vital signs. And they go back and they cure her as well. And in the final kind of stinger, it's revealed that Grace and Emily lived happily ever after, essentially. And Leon doesn't have a hunch anymore. The antiviral thing sorts out his posture, and he's now better than ever, aged 50, sexier than ever as well, stronger than ever. Is that a relatively good job? Have I missed anything out there?
Was that off the top of your head? I don't believe you.
Genuinely was, yeah. Genuinely
was it actually?
Didn't even have character names written down.
Yeah, well, I can tell by Nero, that was terrible. But, oh my god, that was so good. I had to literally go through and, like, write it all down and then, like, check it out. Like, the notes I have, you literally just, like, nailed them, but, like, in, like, a different chronological order than the game is. You were like, okay, here's all the stuff that happens with Grace, here's all the stuff that happens with Leon, this is how they intersect. Actually amazing work. I'm very impressed. Because my version of this would have been like, well, Leon's like, get lost, Xeno.
Which is what he does. I'm sweating. I really am. That was the most pressure I've ever felt. And, you know, I've not been in many high pressure situations, but I feel really on the spot right now. So I need you to speak for a little bit while I just chill out. Yeah, that's fine.
Literally, multiple sections of my notes say Gideon turns back up, transforms into a huge freak, big boss battle. So that's like the quality that you would find otherwise.
Yeah, there's that one point where you're going back to Raccoon City and you're chasing Gideon down, and suddenly you're on a motorbike, and you drive up the side of a skyscraper, and you jump off that, and Gideon's shooting rockets at you. And it's probably the best thing ever made. You know, it's on the border of too silly. And if you are a real fan of Grace's horror sections, you might think, what the hell has happened with this game? But as a fan of both sections, I'm like, yeah, this game can have it all. You can have that tense horror, and it can have you jumping 200 feet on a motorbike off a skyscraper. So the best of both worlds.
Genuinely, I loved that. Like, as a Grace section fan, as a Grace girly, as a Resident Evil 7. Actually, you know what? Before I move on to that bit, I will introduce my kind of experience with Resident Evil. So I give you a break whilst you recover from your like psychic episode there of being able to list everything so neatly. But yeah, I am such a big fan of Resident Evil 7. I think I've said this elsewhere on the internet, but it's because it's actually the first Resident Evil game that I played. Ooh, what the hell?
Whoa.
Yeah. I had played a bit of the other Resident Evil games, but I was actually of the opinion I don't know how this happened, because I should have known better, but I was like, well, there's like 7 games in the series. I need to have played all 7 of them to understand what's going on. Like, not really. I thought the same with Final Fantasy for years, that I wouldn't be able to play Final Fantasy because there's like 15 games and I'd need to understand all the other ones to play the most recent one. So when 7 came out and I was like, oh, okay, it's a new character, it's a new story, it's something I can dive into. As somebody who enjoyed horror films a lot growing up and then fantasy games, moving into horror games, I was like, okay, this is where I'm going to dive into Resident Evil and really get into the series. And I loved it. I thought it was so good, and have been firmly on the new Resident Evil wave since, which I think is really good because you, I know, are an old school Resi fan, whereas I'm like new school Resi, so like 7, 8, Requiem, and then remake 0 or 1, whatever it is, Resident Evil 1 and 2, 3, 4 that we've all had remakes for as well. Those are like my comfort zone with it. So it's been really nice to kind of go into 9 as well as one of these new school players and have Grace Ashcroft as a new player that I don't need to know all the history of. Like, her mom obviously has history. But yeah, I really like how this is established as something that you don't need to know all of the backstory to. It deepens it if you do know about Leon, but you really don't need to know. Like, obviously, like the sherry being in it is a pop and that kind of thing as well. But yeah, coming into this as one of those players, I was like, oh man, this is perfect, because I've played 2, I've played 4 in the remake zone. I've got Requiem now. Like, I feel really in the loop with everything as a newer player, which is really, really nice. And then, yeah, the grey stuff was very 7 coded, and I like that they're keeping that. I don't want them to move back into the action territory that they did when they did, 4, 5, 6. Like, I like 4, I really like 4, but it's not my favorite type of Resident Evil. I think it's so much stronger when we're just like skulking around with big, like, biological freaks turning into big fleshy bulbous things. That's my favorite type of Resi.
That's really interesting. I knew that, I think, in the back of my head, that you were a more modern Resi fan. But it's interesting because I actually line up a lot with what you just said there, despite having that history with the franchise. Resident Evil 1 was one of the first video games that I ever saw. My dad was weirdly played a lot of games across the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 era. They just never touched a video game console again. But he introduced me to a lot of titles like Metal Gear Solid and Resident Evil. And I was way too young to play it, like, both mentally in terms of being able to comprehend the horror of what I was seeing, but also just mechanically, like, I couldn't get to grips. My young hands literally couldn't get to grips with the tank controls and the puzzles of that title. And I tried to play Resident Evil 2 when that came out, but scared me too much. I never got past the opening where you are Leon in a burning raccoon city. Every time I got munched to death, which was every time I booted up that game and saw the "You Are Dead" screen, I was just terrified. Because of that, though, even though I never really played them when I was that little, I had a real affection for the franchise. And then I got into the franchise properly with Resident Evil 4, and I was a lifer from then on. I got Resident Evil 5 day one, played it. Well, I didn't get it. A friend of mine got it, and I played it through to completion via co-op around his house in like one day. So I was in at that point. I actually was a defender of Resident Evil 6 when that came out. Wrongly. I've been back to that game, and it's worse than I remember, but I was so excited for it. I love the idea of it being this big crossover event, having a bunch of different styles of horror in it, like I mentioned earlier, and I was a bit of a defender for that game. But when Resi 7 came around, that was just such a breath of fresh air. They needed to soft reboot the series, and they did it in such an interesting way. They pretty much threw everything out, from story to the general gameplay, and was still able to make it feel so distinctly Resident Evil. They kind of went back to basics in a lot of ways, in terms of the kind of general structure of you are a person trapped in a house, and there are a bunch of beasties around every corner, and you're trying to find keys and solve puzzles to unlock doors, but presented it in a wholly new way. It was much more inspired by Western horror, I think, at the time. It was taking huge cues from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Evil Dead 2013. So it was right up my street. It was so different. Obviously, you had the first-person perspective as well. And what I've loved about the franchise since its inception is the way it's been able to reinvent itself. I think that is so integral, more so than the zombies, more so than the puzzles, to the series' own identity. The fact that it constantly is able to come back and evolve, or mutate, if you will, into something entirely new. I want to see them continuing that trend. So when it comes to Resident Evil 9, I almost want it to be a kind of, I don't think it will be, but I want it to be a swan song for the styles that were established in 7 and 8, and the styles that were re-established in the remakes of 2 and 4, because they blend them together so well. But it has me thinking, selfishly, okay, what's next? What are you going to do next with this IP? What are you going to do next with this brand of horror? Because every time you reinvent yourself, you kind of come back stronger. You come back with something new, and you're able to... It's one of the few long-running franchises that is able to reinsert itself at the top of the pile. Like when RE6 came out, you had a lot of people saying, oh, Resident Evil's antiquated, it's done, it's unk, it's chopped. We've got Dead Space now. Look at the things.
Sorry.
Please, I just slipped that in there.
Oh, he's the youth now.
I'm the youth. But no, it came back stronger, and it reinserted itself at the top of the survival horror mountain. And I think RE Requiem being the fastest selling game to date just proves that people love this franchise when it is at its strongest, when the quality is there, when it does focus in many ways on horror. And I think it's interesting. Maybe it's my algorithm, maybe it's the kind of the friends that I keep, like yourself, but I see so many people talking about the grey sections. I see so many people talking about the newer stuff, and while obviously there's still a lot of discussion around Leon and Raccoon City and the big draw of that, like the clips that I see are from people playing as Grace and running away from these monstrosities, and I just think that's so cool that people have embraced that element as much as the thing that was more of a surefire bet.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the grey sections being as strong as they are, I think it's from having that contrast with Leon's kind of all-out power fantasy side, and then we get kind of the Grace like nuance. But I think it kind of stems from Resident Evil Village as well, like House Beneviento, that section. I think they're recapturing that with the way that they do monsters and the way they do their inescapable chasing down baddies. Because in this game, it's the girl. That's all we ever know her as. We basically figure out that it's a mutated version of a girl that was in with Emily when she's in her little glass cage of emotion. There's one next to it that has a tunnel wall through it, and you figure out it's the girl. And she hates any sort of light, will be burned by it, and burrows around the place whilst you're trying to escape it, and you can't do anything to stop her, and she will bite your head off if she catches you. I love the death animation, by the way, of her chomping you. But I think that they've kind of built on the Village vibe of the baby and made it into the girl, so maybe we'll get like they'll just age up as we continue. But yeah, that idea of being like so small and helpless and kind of consumed by something seems to be like a big part of the horror of these things, the abstract horror of these things, and that the girl again is like another will literally bite and eat you to the point where like your head comes off. I think is a really interesting way of doing the horror. I thought she was terrifying because they've got like that hunch, right? It really reminds me, and I can't remember the title of the story, but I think of it often because it really hit something like harrowing in me when I read it. And every time I try and remember it or try and find it, I can't. Somebody's going to literally find it instantly now and be like, here it is. But the villain in this reminds me of a story I read. I think it was on No Sleep, because that's where I read all my little horror stories. And it was about somebody who had travelled to Japan and was staying with a family. And every night the grandmother would come in and stand in the corner of the room and stare at them whilst they were sleeping. But she wasn't normal-sized grandma. She was like freak grandma. And the way they described her was exactly like the girl in Resident Evil Requiem, where like she's so tall, her head has to like hunch over at the ceiling, and she's got like elongated claws, and she looks like she's got like reflective eyes and stuff, and she would just stand there and stare, and if like the person knows that if they move that she get hunted down by them, and then like the end of it is them running away and making this kind of like story about it. After they've escaped through the woods, and the grandma has like chased them down, and she looks exactly like the girl. And when I started playing it, I was like, it's this story, they've read it, they're making it. Sorry, that was a tangent, but like I literally playing it, I was like, oh my god, yeah, it captured that kind of innate fear I felt, like the description of Uncanny Valley and the way that Resident Evil manages to capture Uncanny Valley with things that are just human enough to be horrible, and then spins it out with body horror to make it even more like nasty. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I'm just saying words, but yeah, it reminded me of that, and it was really scary. And I don't know what it is particularly that makes both of those. One was pure description because it was a story, and one is pure visuals, as you have to figure out the backstory for yourself. So being able to kind of balance those two was a really interesting look at what horror is in different aspects for me.
No, I love that. You know, especially because, and we'll get to this later on in the podcast for sure, but I had real trouble with this one for our ending segment where we look at games or other, you know, pieces of media that we would recommend for people who enjoyed this, because I find Resident Evil 9 Requiem so reverential of itself, so recursive in terms of the tropes that it's pulling from are kind of almost entirely from its own franchise, for better or worse. So to actually get an insight into this monster design that you have there that did remind you of something quite directly and another piece of horror. That's interesting because that's what I want more of from here. But I do also love the girl as a persistent enemy who you can't outright kill for the longest time, who does chase you around. And I think what makes her so frightening to me is this very special magic trick that the most recent Resident Evil games from 7 onwards have been able to play. And that's by giving you a character who is so underpowered, yet has just enough ability to fight back to give you that sense of improvisational combat or improvisational gameplay where it feels like you're scraping through every encounter. One of the biggest issues I think I have with some of the more not antiquated but dated horror titles, first-person horror titles, especially from the early 2010s, was that they all just went, right, you have no weapons, you have no way to fight back, it's a game of hide and seek. And I love a lot of those titles that did that. Outlast and Outlast 2 are some of my favorites. But the general idea back then was you can't have a character with a gun. You can't have a character who can fight back because it makes the enemies less scary. To me, Resi 7 and Resi 9 with Grace's sections prove that that's not necessarily true, and you can have that element of offense as long as it's incredibly limited or impactful. You know, you get Leon's weapon, which is where kind of where the title comes from, this gun called the Requiem, which is a big magnum pistol. And as Grace, you will find maybe 5 bullets for it throughout the entire hospital area. But you can use those to ward off the girl when she comes for you alongside the light, or fight some of the other enemies. And just that addition of being able to run into a room, switch on the light, or have the girl switch off the light or break the light, and that interplay between the push and the pull between you not just trying to hide, which you can do, but also trying to outwit this monster. They've just absolutely nailed that, I think, over the past few years with those persistent enemies. So every time you get grabbed by the girl, which you might do often, and she does bite your head off, you don't feel that sense of frustration that you get in some other horror games where you just think, she's not scary anymore, she's just annoying. She's just, I just want to kind of cheese her AI and get around this section because I don't know what I'm supposed to do, or I'm getting stuck by the scripting of the enemy or where I'm supposed to go, and the game's not doing a very good job of conveying where I'm supposed to go. You never get that sense of frustration, or at least I didn't, with the bigger enemies in this game, because there's always multiple routes you can take. There's always different defensive moves you can have. And to me, that just makes every appearance of her be full of dread, because you're not just thinking, oh, that's a terrifying enemy. It's, okay, what am I going to do now? Is the best option to run? Is the best option to hide? Is the best option to shoot? Should I find a light switch? Like, you're able to think through more than just one thing at a time. And I think that just adds to the overall tension of the setup, really.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like that applies to like loads of the enemies as well. Every time you think you've got something down and you know how to deal with them, they introduce a new version of it. So, you know, when you get into that like quarantine section, you've done the hospital and then the red light comes on, the isolation ward opens up and you're like, what the fuck's gonna be in here? Like, it's like there's always something else. And as soon as you get rid of the girl long enough to get rid of her, you've got like Chunk as well. The I think that's what he's colloquially called in the game. But like he's like taking up full corridors and trying to hunt you down and chase. Like when he burst through the wall, I remember absolutely going nuts because I was like, what the hell? Like, I didn't know this guy was going to be here. But it's so self-referential to like Mr. X and Tyrant and like that kind of vibe that's come from the previous games, but in a new facet. And then when you get to play as Leon, you get to just like absolutely obliterate him straight away, you know, like in like a one-on-one battle where you feel very confident and assured in being able to kill something, but seeing the power of it as Grace means you don't underestimate it. But I don't know, it's just like the interplay between all these things is just so well done. But I remember seeing the chef and that being a difficult one for me because, well, for everybody, because he's much stronger than he needs to be in the game. And when you first see him, he can absolutely just devastate you when you're in his kitchen. But there's a trophy for killing him and he starts roaming the halls afterwards. And you can waste all your bullets, use all your Requiem on him. Like, he takes an absolute go-in to get him down. Or the game gives you this option of the injections that you can put in the back of them. And being given that as an option where they're really rare, you can craft them and they will kill anything instantly. And being able to use that on the chef, I remember being so excited about, because I thought that's such a fun bit of giving you a bit of power in this place that is so oppressing otherwise, and making it feel like you've got a new option to kill something and can come back. And again, you fight off the survival horror frustration of doing the same thing over and over again. There's lots of replayability there. And obviously the game's designed to be replayed because of the amount of trophies and run-throughs and speed things they put in there. Yet still remains scary, or at least can make you jump as well. I just think that Resident Evil has really, really nailed the tone, and this feels like like you say, a swan song for the era that's been perfected. But equally, the era that's been perfected, it feels like the pinnacle of all the things that they've been building to in a really successful way.
Absolutely, I'd fully agree. And that idea that you have all of these options at your disposal, like you said, to take down those sub-bosses or stronger enemies like the chef, that was... To figure that out on your own, I thought was such a great light bulb moment, because in previous games, Resident Evil 7, for instance, a lot of the persistent enemies outside the regular enemies, like Jack Baker, who bursts through the wall and chases you, or Mr. X or the Tyrant or whoever, like, you can put those guys down for a little bit. You can waste your ammo if you want by stunning them, but they're always going to get back up. And I don't know about you, but I went into this game as Grace thinking the same would happen with the likes of the chef or the girl or Chunk or whoever it is. And at a certain point, I realized, if I explore enough, if I save my resources and I'm smart enough with what I am killing and what I'm not killing, I can save that ammo and I can take these big guys down. And you can play the game as Grace very scrappily. You can sneak around these guys and then come through the areas later on, like you mentioned, as Leon, and just blow these guys away that have been giving you trouble. But I like that as Grace, you have the option to do that as well. I think pretty much every enemy except the girl, until you get her proper boss fight, you can outright kill, and there's a trophy for killing as Grace. And realizing you can take down an enemy as big as these big creatures who are bursting through the wall. That moment of, and it's always at the end of the section where you play as her, because you've spent the entire section running away and fighting other enemies and saving up your bullets, to then go, no, I've got this Requiem, I've got 6 bullets left, I'm going to shoot you in the face 6 times until you explode. And you're able to do that. Just that mini arc in and of itself in one level of a game, of getting that little bit of power and getting that catharsis of having ran away as this character, and now you have a semblance of confidence and power to clear out the room. And then obviously, you're back to running around again, but you have that like almost personal relationship with the enemies in that way, where you feel like you've gotten one up on them. You feel like you've gotten a little bit of revenge, like I said, satisfaction or catharsis, when you do say, nah, you have hounded me, and now I finally get to go on the offensive a little bit. And I know it might screw me over for the next level where I have to start again, but for right now, you deserve it, and I'm going to put these bullets straight in your dome. And the fact that it lets you do that as Grace and doesn't just save it for Leon sections, I think is another just genius moment of player agency that they include as well.
Yeah, definitely. What was your favourite bit to do that to? What was your favourite enemy to go and do that with?
I think it was probably... The satisfaction of finding it out came through the chef, where I realized I could just shoot him to death. But it was definitely the Chunk monster, because that thing just blocks off entire wings. It can just absolutely swipe you with its arm, and it terrified me when it first appeared as well, because I wasn't expecting it. And its introduction scene was so effective, and he was the one that I spent the most time running away from, and was the one that I was most convinced was like the girl that I wouldn't be able to kill. He just seemed like he was too much of a proper boss for me to even waste ammo on. So it was literally the last chance saloon where I was Grace and I was getting out of the facility, and I thought, you know what, I've just saved, so I'm going to try it just to see if it works, just indulge my curiosity. And it did, and I got a trophy, and I was like, oh, thanks, Mr. Capcom. I do need a reward for figuring this out, actually. So probably that one, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, oh my god, it was the singing lady for me, because I tried so many times to go into that bar section where she's like, ah! And I was like, shut up, stop singing. And then when you try and get her mates like come out, because you don't realize, or at least I didn't realize. I was like, I'll just get her. There was loads of other like infected in that area. So I tried a few times to get them all, but it was using too much ammo, or I was getting too killed. I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to go and get some more stuff, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to absolutely batter her. And I did, and it was great. And then you get a little coin as a result as well, so you can collect all the antique coins. I love how Capcom rewards you for basically anything you can think of with who you want to kill, how you want to kill them, what you want to explore. It'll give you a trophy, or it'll give you a little item, or it'll give you something that you wouldn't otherwise get. It's like, well done for trying that out. Here you are.
But I think it's good because it encourages you to try other things, that you might not have thought was possible as well. Like when you first do that, and like you said, you not only get an acknowledgement from the game by the character or the enemy dying, but you get that reward as well. I think it makes you go, oh, okay, I'm going to use my brain a little bit more, I suppose, or experiment, save the game, go out on a run, see if I can do this or see if I can do that. And it doesn't always pay off, but when it does, it feels great. It feels really good. I'd forgotten somehow about the singing monstrosities, the singing ladies, because what? I know we're trying not to mention too many other games in this, but one of my favorite scares in games from the past 5 years isn't even a horror game. It's from Elden Ring, and there's a bit in that game where you're traversing an area and you can hear the singing in the background. And the first time I played, because I live in a block of flats, I thought it was literally next door. I thought it was music coming in from the flat. I didn't realize it was part of the game. And then I slowly realized, no, it must be. It's getting louder, it's getting closer. And you eventually find the source of it, and it's kind of this freakish bat woman mutated thing. And it's so cool. It gets me every single time. And these enemies in Requiem reminded me so much of that, because you hear them before you ever see them. So you get that idea of like, what is going on? Where is this originating from? And then you see the actual monster, and it just is such a good payoff, especially when you do get to then stab them in the face and stop the singing dead, because it's hurting my ears.
Yes. Well, it's like a super like Nightmare of Mensis as well from Bloodborne with the what are they called? Like the Nightmare Lanterns, something like that. Where they're all going, because I hate them so much. It felt very reminiscent of that, or like at least a little nod to it with their little singing ladies. But I think that works really well, as the whole idea of this game is the infection that's taking people over is one where they keep a semblance of themselves as well. So like you've got the whole idea is that you're going through. We're talking loads about Rhodes Hill Clinic because it's the big best part, I think. The rest of the game's really good. Returning to Raccoon City we'll get onto shortly, because I think we need to have some Leon chat. But yeah, the Rhodes Hill like first impressions are insane, and that you get to see like these zombies, these infected, cleaning up after themselves, or switching the lights on and off, or singing, or doing things that they normally would have in life, but just having them as this one last thing that they remember. Wielding chainsaws because they're doctors, performing C-sections. That was what the chainsaw was originally for. Fun fact. Your face then didn't.
I didn't know if that was true. I was going to make a gag of when I got my appendix out. That's how they did it. I didn't know it genuinely had an origin. That is so sick.
Yeah. They made chainsaws originally to open up women and get them babbies out.
See, I'm still not. That's so obscene. I'm still not sure if it's true. I'm still not sure if you pull in my plunger, but I'm going to believe you.
No, well, women's medicine has always been largely archaic. If you look at things like, birth control and the pill and that kind of thing, and when they were invented and the lack of improvement since, it's kind of like something kind of gets made and then it doesn't get researched as heavily. But the chainsaw is one of the things that was made to help with C-sections, to kind of, emergency do it. I don't think it was done very well for the women involved, obviously, but it would help get the babies out. And yeah, it's kind of like speculums have been the same for hundreds of years, which are, do you know what speculum is?
I do know what that is.
Okay. I just checked because you nodded then. I was like, does he know? I'm going to test him. But yeah, the kind of idea of women's medicine being like that. That's a conversation for another time. I just think it's interesting.
It's funny you mention it because I didn't know the chainsaw thing, but when I was on holiday, we were in a museum and there was a whole section on it was the Museum of the Moving Image, and it was this exhibition about female directors and queer directors and trans directors, and they were talking about like medicine and medicine's practices on like the non-cis male body essentially, and how that has developed or the lack of development over the years. And one of the little exhibitions was really cool. It was like this history of like women's medicine, exactly how you just described there, and how historically, you know, a lot of the medical instruments or whatever were first tested on women's bodies because they were deemed more disposable or whatever. And it was like, okay, we can test it out on the women and we can figure out how it works, and then we can perfect it for the men.
Yeah, and like especially on like people of color and stuff like that as well. Like, and people of color and women always got it absolutely the worst because they were like, well, the pain threshold's different, or it doesn't exist, which is, I always think, is a great place for horror settings, because like humans are the true horror. So when we get to go to the hospitals and be like, oh my god, that's such a barbaric way of doing something, how would they ever think of that? It's like, no, humans did for years, and this is the result of it. So yeah, like seeing a chainsaw kind of in the medical setting where you'd think, oh no, it's for cutting down trees. It's like, no, that's its home. That's where it's from. And I know we're in October 2026 in this game, but it's a nice little throwback to the origins.
That's sick, man. See, when I think I can't enjoy this game even more, you come in with the fact like that. I love this podcast because you are doing the intellectual heavy lifting, and I'm like, roundhouse kicks are cool. I'm like, this is fun. Horror is fun. The girl is fun. And you're giving me a cool insight into this. I rate it a lot, so thank you very much. You mentioned there, though, that idea of the monsters, the zombies, the creatures retaining that element of humanity. And to me, that is one of the game's, the early part of the game's biggest wins. Like, that hospital that we're banging on about so much is so memorable and is so distinct because of all of these little details. Like, no monster, and that's weird for a horror game, but no monster doesn't have a purpose in the game. Even the cannon fodder enemies of the regular zombies, like you said, you know, they have these flickers of their past humanity in them, like the guy turning on the light switch, or the cleaners in the toilets, you know, trying to clean up the blood. And initially, I love that it makes you think, wait, hang on, why? Like, the zombies never acted like this in previous games, and then the more you delve into the notes that are strewn around the place, you realize what they're trying to do with this strain of the T-virus, which creates the zombies and creates the freaks, is to pass down memories, essentially, and to retain memories from kind of person to person in this cloning technology as well. So these are all kind of the failed attempts at that. And it's just so sick. And you get a file on the likes of the chef or like the singing ladies, and it just makes every person that you kill or go up against feel like they were once an actual person, and it just makes the tragedy of their stories so much that bit more potent, and the horror that bit more potent, because you do view them as these tragic, corrupted figures rather than, like I said, cannon fodder. And I think one of the biggest criticisms that I and many people had about Resident Evil 7 is that outside the core family, who act as the main bosses and sub-bosses, what you were fighting were pretty faceless enemies. They were similarly supposed to be people that the family had kidnapped and killed and experimented on, essentially, but that never came through more than just lip service. Whereas here, again, it's another thing they perfected, where they say, no, okay, these were all people, here's a file on them, here's what they used to be. They were a singer, they were a cleaner, they were a patron or whatever, and it just accentuates the horror even more.
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I love how they retain it all, and then that plays in with when you go to Raccoon City and you're fighting like the special agents, like that one section where it turns into Call of Duty. I feel like we should address, because I hated that so much. Not in a way that I didn't like it in the game, but just I struggled with it because I was like, what the hell? Because it was all of these zombies that were used to doing warfare that then like unleash a bunch of bombs on you. I was like, just when you think you know what's going on, something different happens.
No, agreed. That was the one genuine downside, I think, to the game where I have no notes. This is quite bad, and I probably would have cut it. I'm pleased it was only about 5 minutes long, but that's where it went a little too Resident Evil 6 for my liking, and thankfully it is mercifully short. But going back through that section on higher difficulties or whatever, because it's already pretty tough as is. You're suddenly fighting like a room full of people, and they're shooting back at you. I do like the addition of being able to set free some of the monsters in the area on them. But if you're playing on a harder difficulty, that kind of just gives you more issues as well, because suddenly there's a licker, one of the monsters in the fray. No, man, I'm gonna have to use a few grenades to kill this guy now. But yeah, a strange beat for sure. It feels like a completely different game than the Grace section that we've just been talking about.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think that's a nice, like, segue into the... I used to say that all the time, a nice segue. And I used to get comments being like, you do know it's segue? I was like, yes, I do. It's a funny joke about the way it's spelled. Let's segue into Leon S. Kennedy's gameplay section, because this is just delicious. Like I say, power fantasy, like a vampire. Power fantasy, even though he's old and he's diseased and, you know, he's doing his swan song. I thought they were going to kill him, like, full stop, make it the canon ending for this. I'm glad they didn't. But yeah, like, the way that they present him is very much like he's on his last legs. But still, he's got years of training, years of badassery. You know, he's got buns of steel that he uses to unleash his kung fu moves on. Oh my God. Did you look at his buns?
Of course.
Yeah, they're good, aren't they? Yeah.
The character designers have done incredible work on those buns. So straight into the character model viewer, straight on the buns. Looking at the high-res textures of that. No, I love... Sorry, I cut you off there, but I love the interviews that the directors were doing prior to release, where they were talking about Leon Kennedy's design, and they were talking about getting the input on the character design from a lot of the women on the team, especially, to be like, no, how do we do this in a way that isn't male-gazy Chris Redfield in Resident Evil 5, I'm muscles from Brussels and this vision of it. It's like, nah, Leon gets to be absolutely massive, but he also retains that, I don't know, just a distinctiveness to him that I think is lost with so many kind of more generic action hero protagonists, I guess. And those include the Buns of Steel, of course.
No, for sure. Like, by every equation, Leon Kennedy should be, to me, a massively forgettable, just like, you know, cookie cutter. He is special agent. He's super powerful. He's got all the one-liners. Like, it's very much feels like super 2000s kind of character coded, but he's not. He is so interesting and engaging. And I didn't play Resident Evil 4 original, I played Resident Evil 4 remake, so I thought his interactions with Ashley and the way that they kind of handled the like gendered roles of those two things, about him being like the savior and her being like the damsel in distress, I thought that was really interestingly done. And in this, he's like again a savior, but he gives Grace his weapon. Like he supports her when she's running through things. It never feels like he's patronizing her or like he's the tough man and she is kind of just there. I have separate issues with the gender roles of this game that I do actually want to get into. That's probably my one big negative with Resident Evil Requiem. But I do think it's not about Leon, it's about the other parts of it, and I think he's handled really well and feels interesting and dynamic and like a real person, and like he's working with Sherry, and you know, like relies on these people around him when he's ill and sick and not being able to cope with things, and it doesn't feel like he's emasculated by it either. I think that's what makes him so like sexy old Uncle Leon in it, the hot Uncle Leon.
Exactly. You know, and to be fair, the guy's only 49 minimum in the game, 50, 51-ish. He's not old yet. He's got some many years left in him now. He's being cured. But no, again, I agree, and it's why I also really appreciate them allowing you to kill some of those tougher enemies as Grace, because they very easily could have just said, no, you cannot kill them as her. You're going to get the catharsis later as Leon when you go into the hospital and you do have all of these weapons and you've got all of this combat experience, and then you can take them out. You can, of course, play it that way and you can still get some satisfaction from it, but it's not it's not a hard line that the game takes. It's like, no, she also is in the FBI, and yes, she's very anxious, but she's here for a reason as well, and you can have that power curve with her, and it's not just a case of doing the damsel in distress trope. I think it's interesting that like you said, you mentioned Resident Evil 4 Remake, and even though this game is nostalgic for and harkens back to the original games, Leon and Resident Evil 2, like, I think it works much more if you've actually played the remakes, or at least played them recently, because just Leon's arc is way more... And I'm not saying it's better. I love the original 4. It's one of my favorite games ever, as is 2. But it's more defined. It's more cohesive in the remakes of 2 and 4 and now 9. They feel more of a piece. Whereas even though I love RE4 OG Leon, he's a very different character to who Leon was in Resi 2 previously. He's pretty much an entirely new character with the exact same features, right? Whereas now, this feels like it's paying off the Leon that we saw in RE2 Remake, and then who was developed, like you said, with those relationships with Ada and Ashley in RE4, and now we end up here, and it just makes it works a little bit better from a storytelling standpoint, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And then also, he's just cool. He's just cool. And all his stuff is cool. Like, what was your favourite Leon section? Let's go from there, because I feel like the whole... The Raccoon City nostalgia, I feel like you could talk forever about it, but also it all boils back to the same point of, it is just amazing to be back there and to experience all the Easter eggs, see the new perspectives, look through the eyes of old Leon when you've seen him as young Leon in exactly that spot. But yeah... Separately, what would you say your favourite Leon moment is?
Ooh, I think it probably has to be... It's going back to Raccoon City, but it's the very first section in Raccoon City where you drive up and you're in a bombed-out, post-apocalyptic looking version of this place that you've been to at this point so many times in the games. And I loved it because I have a huge soft spot for the Paul W.S. Anderson Resident Evil movies.
Yeah!
We're going to do a podcast on them at some point, but in the third film, Resident Evil Extinction, they do this absolutely crazy, ballsy move of saying, well, the world ended, and now everything is a Mad Max post-apocalyptic wasteland, and everything's desert. And even though I thought that was quite dumb when they did it, I thought it was great aesthetically. And to kind of bring that over to this version of Raccoon City, which is so... literally apocalyptic, there's nothing left. It's all grey, it's all dust, it's all deterioration. That's not how you pronounce that word. What the hell? It's deteriorated. It's deteriorated. I'm gonna go with that. See, it's hard.
Deteriorated.
Yeah, I'm sure there's another version of that ends with ION, but I'll cut this bit out anyway. When you get to this...
It's staying. Figure it out. It's staying.
This deteriorating location, and the zombies themselves, they're so less human than the ones that you encounter in the hospital. They're all skin and bone. They look like the walkers from The Walking Dead. Just aesthetically, that did so much for me. I love the little nods and Easter eggs like you mentioned, but just kind of even separate from that, if it wasn't Raccoon City, if it was just Leon being plunked in Boston from The Last of Us, it would still be my favorite section just because of how well it plays. That little combat sandbox that you have, the openness of the areas, the little secrets that are hidden, the interactive moments that you have with the environment, being able to scavenge for items, being able to see a kind of like a bombed out skyscraper in the distance that has a few enemies on it, and you're wondering, like, am I going to be able to get there, or is that just scene dressing? And then you can get there. I just thought that exploratory area at the beginning of the Raccoon City section was just, especially coming after Grace's more intense and horror-focused ones, it's just such a cool change of pace, but especially visually for me. I love the visuals of the zombies rising from the ground, rising from the ashes, guts hanging out, completely overwhelming you, and then you get a big spider boss fight as well, which is a great callback to the other games. I was wondering how you're going to handle that.
No, oh my god, I I will say it here, and I will do it. I will make a short video on social media because I played it on stream, and I'll make a highlights clip of it because it was genuinely the most scared and upset I have been playing a horror game ever.
Wow.
Perhaps I thought I could handle it. I literally. I literally started the section going, oh, okay, there's a big spider. That's okay, because I used to have arachnophobia, but I'm over it now. And then, like, went to try and fight it and was going, ah, ah, ah! Like, I hate... And then when it's, like, starts shooting its babies at you, I really hate baby shooters. Any enemy that shoots babies at you is my least favourite enemy. And, like, babies... Oh, like, then it's a big furry spider, and then they've got the little... Oh, it's literally in a game full of mutated monsters, of zombies, of things beyond your imagination that can come back and eat you alive. The fucking big spider is still the scariest bit.
Mate, it must be kind of a double-edged sword to be some of the designers on games like this, because you spend years of your life coming up with creative designs, thinking about backstories for the girl or the singers, and then it's like, oh, the big spider. Yeah, that's the thing I was most afraid of, actually. And it works for so many people. And it's like, you talk to some people, and they're like, yep, Resident Evil 9 Requiem has a boss fight with a big spider, and it's the scariest thing in any game ever. And I hated it coming after me. I hated the fur. I hated shooting its little babies, like you mentioned. And it works so well. It makes me regret so deeply that they cut the spiders from some of the previous remakes. Get them back in, you know? I want to be scared by them again.
Agree. I think I saw somebody post a tweet being like, alert, spiders are back in Resident Evil. And as much as I hated it, like, I love the power of something to really frighten me, and digging into why and like what it is that really like feels so unnerving. And I think to have felt that with, like, you know, the old remakes, where the remakes of the older games where they have these that literal room that's just got a big black widow in it, and, like, you know, have the big spiders in there. It did feel very nostalgic for that era. But yeah, I could have done without it, and I'd have been fine, but it was there and it was horrible. And I feel like it really nailed, like, there's so many spiders in video games that are scary, right? And they're scary because they look super gross, and you're seeing up all in their fangs and their multiple eyes, like the frostbite spiders from the Elder Scrolls games. And, you know, they're up on the ceilings and they come down and they've got that kind of, they can be anywhere sort of vibe. This one is just massive and moves really fast. And, like, I think it just nails that idea of seeing a spider in a web, and then, like, it seeing you, and, like, all of the little babies, like, emerge from the spider sack and that kind of thing. Like, that is such, like, when you see that for the first time in nature, it's both beautiful and terrifying. And they've kind of taken all of the beauty out of it and made it just shoot it straight from its, like, ussy at you. I don't even know if spiders have that, but, you know, from the thorax, let's say. Yeah, we've moved on from Hogwatch. It's Ussy Watch is next.
Yeah, it's Spussy Wash. Yeah, good.
The Spussy. Yeah, it's just so vile and violent. And then when the spiders die and they go really crunchy and all their legs go in, and seeing it in, like, the underground, like, and then you find other random little babies down there that I wasn't expecting as well. Sickening. Blech.
I was going to bring that up next, when you find, I guess it's another one that is dead in the subway, and like you said, it's all curled up. I didn't notice it at first, and then I got a little bit closer to it, thinking, what's that over there? Oh, it's the carcass of a spider. I was so convinced it was going to get up and chase me again, and I'm so pleased that it didn't. I like that it was just there's this haunting effigy in the background. But you mentioned there, like, the movement and the animation of the spiders. Generally speaking, the animations in this game are just absolutely incredible. Like, playing as Leon, half of the fun is watching him reload a gun in the various ways he can do it. Holding his flashlight under his chin while he reloads a shotgun with his free hand. Like, all of these little cool moves that, again, make the game feel so tactile. They come over to the enemies. They come over to that spider, like, in the way it's, like you said, the speed in which it can scurry away. It can like, get underneath, you know, openings in the walls and stuff. I just think it adds so much to the, again, tactility of the enemies, of the world that is able to be created, and it just makes them feel a little bit too uncanny and a little bit too realistic, even though they are these larger than life OTT B movie versions of themselves. They retain that the element of horror that we actually are scared about.
Yeah, definitely. The animations work best as well on the big lump of tofu that follows you around the Raccoon City Police Department. I loved finding him because I kept hearing the boing, boing, and I was like, what is that?
Did you figure out that it was tofu while you were playing, or did you figure that out like when you Googled it afterwards?
No, I figured out whilst I was playing because I kept hearing this boing and I was like, is that Leon's buns of steel? Like, what is it? So I heard the boing and I turned around as the boing happened and saw this thing like poking out and go back. And I found it like innately terrifying at first until I clocked it was the big tofu. And I was like, oh my God, it's the big tofu. And it's making a silly noise. So yeah, and then I spent, again, because I streamed Resident Evil 5, Resident Evil 9 to when I first played it. I spotted it and then spent about 20 minutes trying to take a good screenshot of it. So that was I'll send it you, Josh. You can put it in the edit. A beautiful
Please
screenshot.
do. I will.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the edit because I didn't know what it was. I kept hearing it and I kept catching the most fleeting of images of it as it was skirting past the windows. But I was just thinking, like, what is this? I thought it was a robot. I thought it was a Wall-E style robot for the longest time. And then I'd kind of forgotten about it by the time I hit credits. And then went back to replay section and thought, wait, yeah, what was that? That was never mentioned again. And then I had to Google it and I was like, oh, that's what it was. I just had no idea. It was this thing, this creepy little noisemaker haunting me for the entire thing. So if you've got a good screenshot, that's like catching Bigfoot or something in the act.
Yeah, in it. I was like, Bigfoot, get out here because I need to take a picture. Like, it took a while. But all of the Easter eggs in RPD were just, next level. Like, that he's in there, that you've got the Rebecca Chambers stuff that you have to do like a whole mini quest to find, that you've got the locker that has all of the Capcom games in. Like, the way that they approach game making is so gorgeous. But we have spoken about the positives of this game and could continue to for many years. So I want to pose the question to you. Is there anything that you really didn't like about Resident Evil Requiem?
Yes. There are a few things that I didn't like. I do have quite a few criticisms of the game, and you've segued into it quite nicely there.
Thank you.
This isn't a major criticism, but I was going to mention it just off the conversation that you just had about going back to Raccoon City Police Department. That was actually something that didn't actually hit for me all of that much. And I think the big issue that I had with it, and again, not issue, it was just a barrier to stop me feeling as nostalgic as I think they wanted me to, or as reverential as I think they wanted me to, is that the RPD sort of never left. If I hadn't played a game since the OG Resident Evil 2, I think I would have felt something going back and seeing it for the first time completely destroyed and re-rendered in 3D. But because it's already featured in RE2 Remake and then pops up again in RE3 Remake, and now we're getting it again in RE9 Requiem, I just personally, again, it was going to work differently for different people. I didn't have the distance from it to appreciate it enough. And especially because I went through RE2 again just at the end of last year. It was less a case of, wow, can you believe we're back here? And more a case of, oh, it's this place again. It was a little overly familiar in that regard, in a way that the streets of Raccoon City weren't, because even though they do feature in RE3 Remake, I felt like they're not the exact same ones, and, it's just kind of more like the imprint of Raccoon City as you remember it from back in the day, whereas this is like, okay, here is the RPD from the past two games that you've played, kind of like reskins. So that one didn't work for me personally, but I do know that it has worked for a lot of other people, and I'd be interested to see if it worked for you as a modern Resident Evil fan who was, got that nostalgia from those two titles.
Yeah, because like my, obviously, Resident Evil Remake 2 and 3 have it in there, but I have played those when they were around and then kind of haven't played it since. So I definitely felt nostalgic for it, but as also somebody with a terrible long-term memory, I was like, oh God, I feel like I'm supposed to be remembering more as I'm going around here, especially doing it streaming and having people be like, wow, it's that bit. I'd be like, oh yeah. And then I love being able to sit. I think that's more just a problem with the format of playing something with an audience, but playing something on my own and being able to kind of like look back and research things and maybe like, you know, be like, what, why was this important, and be able to have a refresher and go, oh my god, yes, I remember this bit. Or again, playing it recently and then finding it again, I think would be really special. I definitely thought it worked for me, but I can totally respect the idea that you've seen too much of it for it to be a super special place. I think it was because we get to see it like totally bombed out, and the extra bits we find in there build on the lore that was established in those earlier games. Like again, the Chambers picture, and you know, seeing the lockers and seeing things and finding the sign that still has the like, and you can find 2 L's for it, that kind of thing. I thought the way that they approached it as like a bit of tongue-in-cheek fun, and then like as you go out into the streets and do like gun shop kendo and stuff like that from that same sort of section. Yeah, that I thought was done very well for me.
I think I still enjoyed it, and while I would never say it's a complete negative, it's just because it does work so well from Leon's character point of view, from like him returning to it felt more substantial and felt more significant than me returning to it, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like getting those flashbacks and his reaction to thinking about Kendo or thinking about Marvin, whoever it was, you know, just being back there for the first time and the significance that it has for him allowed it to then work for me. But as a piece of plain nostalgia, I guess that's where it kind of fell short a little bit, but still ultimately, you know, more than makes sense within the context of the narrative, and is ultimately very significant for Leon's arc and finding out a little bit more about his own opinions and just kind of the impact that these events had on him as a character who was so large than life, you know, him being forced to reflect and to go back to this place of epic trauma, like, really, really works.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, I think you've nailed it there. I think I definitely approached it from, oh, I'm Leon going back, whereas as a player, I think I felt guilty that I wasn't, like, photographic memory for it, whereas going back as Leon and being like, this was his first day, and, you know, he's now, he was, like, the little baby-faced boy, and now he's a man, I'm like, oh, that's pretty fun. And I think that's a fair criticism to make. I think for me, a criticism I have is actually about Grace's character and the way they approach her, separate to the Leon stuff, because I think I'm kind of sick of like it's always it always feels like a comment on gender, where it's either like, you know, they're an underpowered character that are figuring things out and they've got to get to grips with it, and then they've got this kind of like male counterpart that's super badass, or they're super badass and take on loads of masculine traits to be able to kind of counteract the other side of it. So I'm not massively like peeved about her being one or the other, because it's just kind of the way that you have to do it with any character. You know, she's come in, she's capable, she can do what she needs to do, she's still very stressed by it, and she's also traumatized from remembering the death of her mother as well, which obviously was awful. Like the way that they made her go back to that hotel I think is horrible, because she's still figuring her stuff out. And
that guy, report your boss to HR. You're like, go to this hotel where there was a murder, where your mum got murderized, and just do us a favor, stop being a crybaby and get out there now.
Yeah, because at first I was like, oh, come on, love, you're the FBI, you can do it, because the way that it was approached. And then you see what happens, and I'm like, that man is evil. Like, she literally watched her mom be killed in front of her at this place and then had to like run and escape. I was like, how could they do this? But my not problem, but my criticism, my thing that felt a little bit for me was, I hate it when there's a child put into the narrative and we have to have like that mother-daughter dynamic built in. I, as somebody who's not super maternal, who doesn't particularly want children, and then have to play a game where like female representatives are like mothering someone or looking after someone, or, you know, it's the Sigourney Weaver and Ripley and Newt version of Aliens, where we get these super gendered roles. I just felt like it was unnecessary to me. I think she could have teamed up with Emily and cared about her in a way that didn't feel like she was her mother. But then I also think there's a fair argument to be made that she sees so much of herself in her, because there's this clone vibe and they do look very similar. When I first saw her, I was like, that's something to do with Emily's DNA, which I'm sure many people did because they look so similar. And then, you know, it gets explored throughout the narrative and eventually revealed not to be true, but plays around with it. Yeah, I just kind of hate that dynamic where we're always introduced to women as caretakers or people who need to prove their power or look after the kid whilst something crazy goes on in the narrative otherwise. And I'm sure there'll be people who disagree with that, but for me, it just stuck in my throat a bit with the Emily storyline. I was like, you know, she can care about a kid without it being like mommy Grace, you know?
You know what? It's actually interesting because I thought about you when this plot point was wrapping up, because when you get to the point where Grace takes on that, she has that maternal instinct and she takes Emily kind of as a surrogate daughter, Newt style, like you mentioned, that she wants to save. I thought, okay, that's a little bit cliched, I suppose, but I kind of get it from the point of their commentary on Leon as well, like mirroring it with him, because his drive is he's got to save someone this time. You know, during the events of Raccoon City and Resident Evil 2, he doesn't really save anyone. He's not there to save anyone. He's there to get out alive. And he's let a lot of people die over the years. Not let, but being unable to stop them from dying. So I thought it was the other side of the coin to that, where you know, you have Grace and she's there and she's in this life or death situation, and similarly she's like, there's one innocent person here, I need to get her out. I was like, okay, it's a bit cliched, but okay. Where they went a little bit too far for me, similar to you, was at the end where it's just revealed, okay, not only are we doing that, but now Emily has been adopted by Grace, and Grace's entire thing that she was building up to was not necessarily being in the FBI or, you know, having her own motivation that way. It was ultimately getting this family, which makes sense narratively. It's something that she was robbed of. You know, her mother died under these circumstances. She wants to be there for someone in the way that her mother wasn't, and be less mysterious and be more maternal. I do get it. That also doesn't detract from it playing into that gendered cliche that you mentioned, especially when we have this female protagonist in the game that gets so much focus and otherwise has so much agency and is able to be so distinct and three-dimensional. I thought that note to end it on, which is it's quite melodramatic and B-movie in and of itself, as Resident Evil always has been, but it's just, it felt a little too neat, a little too, here's the happy ending that we're giving these characters. And more importantly, here's the conventional happy ending that we're going to give those characters. So I definitely see that. I can't sit here and say that I didn't think of it while it was happening, because I was like, oh, this is a choice. All right, okay.
Yeah, I think like it's just something you wouldn't catch like Leon or Chris Redfield doing in the same way. Like, you know, him looking after Ashley and the amount of grief that she gets for Resident Evil 4, and like, and innately being the damsel in distress and being somebody that needs looking after, and also being a woman. Like, obviously she catches a lot of crap for that. It just took in my craw a little bit, but I also think they can't massively win with this stuff because Resident Evil games are based on those 2000s tropes. They do have those roles kind of built into them and challenged sometimes and sometimes reinforced. And we live in a world where some things are feminine, some things are masculine, and then we've got kind of the in-between and the outside. And with these characters, they've just like filled in those roles with them. You know, I don't think it's the end of the world or anything, but I do think it bears commenting on because it's like every sci-fi game. Every single sci-fi game where there's a woman in space, they go, and my dad founded this company, or my dad was an astronaut, my dad did this, and I need to go and do it to keep my father's legacy alive. It's never their mother. It's never like somebody that's like just doing it because they want to. Every man in it is in there because they love protecting their people and doing this and the other, and the woman is always given some sort of excuse as to why she's there. And it felt like that for Grace. It felt like, you know, oh, family is the most important thing to her. Why can't it be the same as Leon, where she wants to be the best agent she can be, and she's scared and she overcomes it and faces all this trauma and comes out stronger and more determined? You know, it's like actually, but also again, to undermine my own point, she should be allowed to be soft and feminine and motherly without it being a criticism either. So it's like, it's just for me. I just don't like it, but it might work for people.
It's a hard one in it because like obviously games are not great even when they try to be when it comes to like those gendered representations and whatnot. And we have had examples of the franchise going in that other direction, where they have this dichotomy of, you are a very feminine mother, or you're a masculine badass, and you do that kind of career focused thing. But then maybe you take on too many masculine tropes when you do that kind of representation as well, and you get into that kind of almost girl bossy soldier aesthetic that we've seen so much in action horror, especially. But I definitely. I think they do go a little bit too far with it, and it definitely is a lazy cliche that they play into, and they have done previously in the games. And I think that's maybe why it's a little bit more frustrating here, because they've had chances before to do similar things, and this time around, even though they do contextualize it within the narrative, you're kind of getting a Claire situation again. In Resident Evil 2, if you've not played that game, you have a secondary character alongside Leon called Claire. And again, her role in that game, she's still a badass, but she has to look after a young girl, and her main motivation in the game, outside of trying to find her brother, is to make sure this girl, Sherry, who appears in Resident Evil 9 Requiem, make sure she gets out of the situation okay. So to do it again this time around, it's like, again, it certainly plays into the idea that this game is incredibly reverential to its past, and we're seeing like the past repeat itself in many ways, but also you had the opportunity to do this a little bit different, and you kind of ultimately go down the route that we have seen before in this franchise. So even more so than it being cliched, it's a little rote, I suppose, from what we've already seen in the series anyway.
Yeah, I think like if Sherry had adopted her, I think that would have been different, because like she's not in action, she's like, and she had that role herself. I think there would have been something less patronizing about it being another character. But again, this is like a me issue as much as it is anything else. I think it's worth commenting on, but I also totally respect that other people are going to have different views on it from their interpretations as well. Like, plenty of moms play video games. Maybe they look at that and think, yeah, that's what I would do in that situation. That's the relationship that I think is really authentic to me as well. So yeah, I would just like more Jill. I want to see more Jills.
Bring Jill back. Like the version of Jill in Resi 3 is so good. Like that performance is so good. The direction in that game is great. But no, I'm totally with you. Like, it's definitely nothing. I wouldn't put it in the bad category for the same reasons that you've mentioned there, because I do think a lot of people, a lot of mothers, a lot of people with that maternal instinct or that parental instinct will love a story like this. It'll resonate with them so much. But like you said, especially when this is the precedent almost from Aliens onwards for this type of character and this type of story, it is one that we have seen more than the alternatives, perhaps. Yeah,
for sure. And yeah, I think that's fair to we can tuck that one away. Like, we can leave that one there.
I've got two more. I've got two small ones. One, and it kind of plays into that idea of laziness and cliches, is the character designs and the enemy designs we've absolutely raved about. We love them. I think it's probably as good as Resident Evil has ever been. I think they've definitely gotten away from the generic mutated baddie with a lot of eyes on his shoulder trap that they got themselves into for a while. I do think there's a great piece that I read by an author called Hannah Ogilvy Young. I hope I'm getting your name right. That went into this idea of Resident Evil having an issue with fatness. That is the title of the piece. And that is something else that, when it pops up in these games especially, it makes me think, have you not got like a little bit of a different idea? We mentioned it with Chunk, who is a great persistent enemy, but again plays on those very old tropes of fatness and the human body, and the fatness inherently being like this abject, horrifying thing. And I only bring it up because it's a not very recent, but a more recent thing with Resident Evil to do this. Like, I've been playing through all of the games just because I was on such a high from Requiem. I went back to the original 2, original 3. I played through Resident Evil 0, Resident Evil Revelations, and bits of Resident Evil 6 as well. And from like Resi 5 onwards, you start to see the fat enemy pop up like way more frequently. And in Resi 6, there's this kind of groan-worthy monster early on that again kind of just does this really tired trope of he is the big enemy, and we're kind of gonna accentuate the fatness of this character to a kind of almost comedic degree. And you get that in this game as well with Chunk, literally being called Chunk, you know, and having that element of it like be played for laughs. And again, it's not really my wheelhouse to talk about it. I just thought it was an interesting article for sure, and something that definitely kind of popped up while I was thinking about it, because it was like, yeah, okay, it's almost expected now, right? It's almost expected that when you have enemy types, you're going to have the fat zombie in particular, the bloater from Left 4 Dead, you know, like this big enemy, this big mutated enemy that comes out and is horrifying purely because of the depiction of fatness that it presents. But again, I'm not a authority on this. I just thought it was interesting, and this article helped me sort of unpack something that I was trying to grasp while I was playing through the game in and of itself.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up a bloater, because like I feel like the game does a really good job of like, just to talk about Last of Us Part 2 for a second, or Last of Us in general, sorry. But like the game does a really good job of explaining that these are bloated from like the water, and then like, you know, gives us your idea of this. It's not necessarily a fat monster, but it takes on the role of one because it's absorbed water, it's taken on this. But then they give it those tropes of like the noises it makes and the way it approaches things like feel very much a caricature of like a larger person or a fat person, you know, that then like they're horrifying and mixed up in that kind of way as well. So it's a really interesting one, because in this they make no such bones about kind of giving it a different explanation other than it loves to eat. But it's interesting, again, as somebody who's not an authority on this but has watched their own body change and people's perceptions change of that in social media as well. Like there's people who refer to me as Fat Ash now because I've put on weight since I was at like What Culture and stuff, and they're like the vitriol that comes with that, and like the opinion people have on your body, and then to see it reflected in media like to extremes, and people are disgusted and horrified by it. I do think people just need to wind their neck in general, and then like that would be kind of dealt with better in games like this too. I think this game, it wasn't something that stood out to me straight away with the rest of it. I think Chunk, absolutely. But thinking of the chef, I did like how he was a larger man, but he wasn't like made disgusting for being bigger. He was like a chef. He'd obviously enjoyed his meals and stuff, and that's absolutely great. And he was a different body type to everybody else. And I enjoyed that he was in there as this person looking a specific way without it being a caricature or expanded version of that. But then you look at something like, I think people would rightly bring up the Duke from Resident Evil 8 as like a good character, one of your characters that's like on your side, and how they play with his size being kind of a very exaggerated thing. And I think you can argue two ways in that lots of people made like fanfic for the Duke and were really attracted to him, even though he was kind of displayed in a way where if they'd made him an enemy it would be a disgusting, horrifying thing. They kind of subverted that and made him this lovely gentleman who also happens to be a bigger size, and then will cook food with you and enjoy it and that kind of thing. That's the only thing that felt like, okay, you can make the big guy cook a meal. But yeah, I just think there's interesting, like there's a dichotomy between the way how they approach largeness and fatness and weight, and I think it's very fair to say for this game and for Capcom's approach to it across other titles, and like, yeah, you've got context for things, so it doesn't always make it okay as well.
Yeah. Oh no, totally. I think it's like, yeah, it's one of those criticisms where we're like critiquing the game, you know. It's not something that, like, I think sometimes, not to just tar the entire audience or whatever, but sometimes I think you bring stuff up like this and it's like, oh, you're focusing on this element that's going to knock it down from a 9 to a 7 now or something. And it's like, that. I love this game. It's my game of the year so far, you know, but it doesn't mean it's not interesting to talk about when it comes to like these representations of body types or whatever it is. And just the author of that piece that I mentioned, like they were talking about, like just mentioning this flippantly before the article was written, and then people going really defensive and being like, no, like you can't say this about this game. And it's like, no, the game can be good, but also we can talk about it openly and not in bad faith, and mention people and characters like the Duke, like you mentioned, and people's relationship with them, people's relationship with their own body. It's kind of, I think it's tough as well because it's a very personal thing, like you mentioned. Especially being online, you have it worse by virtue of being a woman online with extra scrutiny on your appearance, right? But I remember like the first time I put on like a little bit of weight, and then similarly, I've noticed the comments kind of start to shift, and it was accusations of, "Oh, Josh, you're not hiding that tummy very well. You need to stop pulling down your shirt and stuff." And I'm suddenly like, "Whoa, guys, like, what the heck? I've skirted by for years with the most mid appearance, and then as soon as I put on a little bit of weight, suddenly I'm under all of this scrutiny, right?" And so I think with like that in mind, and the way that a lot of people have their own relationship with their own bodies and how they're displayed in media and whatnot. It's an interesting thing because, again, like what you mentioned with Grace's arc, it is something that keeps popping up in Resident Evil, but horror generally. And it is just a little bit of a shame when you get a game like this that puts so much thought into the backstories of its enemies to make the world feel real and lived in, to then get to Chunk, who was otherwise a great character, but it's like, oh, he's the fat guy who eats a lot and he can't stop eating and he's really big and he's called Chunk, and it's like, all right, okay. Yeah. You could have maybe give that another draft, perhaps.
Yeah. See, there's a part of me that like, I totally think that this is important and valid, and I think it's interesting for the gender side of it as well, the body types and the gender thing. Like, it's kind of impossible to do it right? Because if they did it perfectly, like it would be wrong for somebody else. So like, and some things are going to fall into tropes and build on those as well. I do feel like, not to defend them, but I feel like the way that they kind of made him a monster, like a gluttonous monster, and not necessarily a fat man who then is, you see just a man eating. It's like it's this creature that's blown out and got all this biomass to it. I do think that's an interesting way of doing it as well, and there is an innate horror tied to greed and to overeating to the point of gluttony and sickness, and that being part of something. I think it's much more interesting when it's really thin characters or like skeletal characters that like eat so much but can't don't get the benefit of it. Like if we're talking about things like Wendigos and things like that, like I think that's a really interesting take on it, where you've got that fear of greed and gluttony and of being consumed, but like the appearance of it is completely different. It's one of those things where like I'm totally sorry if I've approached it wrong or said anything that isn't right to anybody listening, because obviously this is just, again, us yabbering about it. But yeah, I do think that's a really interesting point to bring up and a really valid criticism, and also there's loads of conversation you could have around it, and again, that it's so personal as well.
That's it. Like I say, I'm not an authority on it by any means. It was just trying to make sense of something that's been at the back of the mind for a while, I guess. And like you mentioned, there's so many different facets to it, and all of that jazz. It's with horror especially. We've talked about it on this podcast already, but it's so much of horror is like what you bring to it, right? It's your interpretation of it. It's how it relates to your own traumas or your own imagination or your own sense of self or identity or whatever. So I think it's a topic that's going to be different for different people in that way. Yeah,
definitely. So, did you have another thing you wanted to bring up, or shall we move on?
I do, but I feel like I've been very negative, and I don't know if I want to be negative again. I was only going to mention the fact that even though the game works so well as two sides of two different coins, I almost pine for them to be split and to be full games each, because I just enjoyed them that much. And even though Leon's sections are so good from an action standpoint, from a mechanical standpoint, and a gameplay standpoint, because it's truncated, it's not able to go as far as the arc of something like Resident Evil 4, which to me has such a great sense of power progression. You get way more variety in terms of weapons. You get that sense that you're building in power as you go. Whereas this, because it's shorter, so it's trying to play more of a greatest hits, you don't get that full arc or that full variety. And the same with kind of like the enemies as well. Even though the enemies that you do have and the variety is great in the hospital, like we've mentioned, I think that also kind of falls by the wayside in the second half, where it's a lot of zombies, a spider, you get the lickers in there. And it's great, don't get me wrong. I'm just thinking of other games like Resident Evil 4 or Resident Evil 2 or whatever it is that keep throwing new things at you, whereas this, I think, settles into a groove a little bit earlier. And that groove is great, don't get me wrong. And I'm very selfish for wanting two singular games out of these different approaches, but it's just because the approaches are so good. That's all. It's just because they've nailed them so well. If they hadn't done that, I wouldn't be selfish. So it's not a criticism. It's just a comment in terms of what they could have added if they had an extra $200 million and an extra 2 years. But, you know, they would never have released this game if they made the version of it in my head, which is totally fair. And I always have Resident Evil 4 to give me that exact sense of progression and power progression.
Yeah, for sure. I think like I feel like you're looking for that Resident Evil 2 where it's like Route A and Route B and you have the two characters doing their things and how they interlock, and you could do it as a sequel. I'm glad it's not. I like a self-contained story. I don't want to see like one half and then the other half. And I know we're going to get DLC for this, if not already. You know, coming up soon. I think it's been officially announced, that kind of thing. But yeah, the DLC being like, I think it's so Chris coded, because at the end they're like, "Where's Chris been? He's supposed to have picked you up." I'm like, okay, you stink of DLC. You absolutely stink. So, yeah, I'm glad that it's all kind of in one spot, and the way that it happened for me, I was a fan of. Again, can totally understand how it wouldn't be for you. I like a shorter game. If it was 2 massive games, I probably would have been like, oh, let's spend time in doing things I like.
Well, that's it. You know, a game leaving you wanting more, I always think is a good thing. Like, if you come out of it and you're not fatigued, because games are so big these days that sometimes you can finish a 40-hour title and think, I am so glad to see the back of that. I have played that loop to death. I've gotten my fill hours ago, and now it's finished, and I get to move on and try something else. A game that you don't get sick of and that leaves you wanting more and leaves you wanting to go back through it or jump into a specific level and do that combat encounter again. It's done something incredibly well, and it's made some magic there. So again, it's a slight negative that comes from a massive positive.
Oh, ho, 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 it's magic. You know. Right, so on to the last part of our podcast. Josh Brown, we are looking at connected horror. Do you want to start us off? Do you want to kick us off? What you got? What you got in your little satchel, in your bum
Well,
bag?
I've only got one.
One?
I've only got one, but it's a big one. It's a big one. Like I said at the beginning, I had a real issue with this getting different pieces of media to tie into it, because I found it so... I don't want to just sit here and list Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 4, Resident Evil 5, 6, all of the good ones, you know? So I was trying to find something that fit into it. And of course, I'm going back to the grey sections, which I like the most. But it reminded me so much of Amnesia the Bunker.
That's on my list as well.
Is it?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, I'm pleased. I've got to steal this first. Amnesia the Bunker is a game that I think about all the time, and I'm not a huge Amnesia fan. If you don't know what this game is, it's a first-person horror game where you are trapped in a World War I bunker with this beast that has taken out everyone inside, and you have to escape, essentially, because it's on lockdown. It's a bit of a extravagant bunker with a lot of security systems. But what I love about it is similar to Grace's sections here. It's got this puzzle box approach to it, where you're given a bunch of different items that you can use, and it's about using them smartly. So the enemy itself can't be killed, but like the girl, you can injure it so it flees the scene. So you get this revolver with a few bullets that you can find. You have to, and I love this, you have to get the chamber of the revolver out and manually put in every bullet, and it's so slow, and then flick it back up. But every time you shoot the monster, it gets stronger as well. So if you shoot it and it flees, when it comes back, it'll take 2 bullets to then disperse again. Then it'll take 3 bullets, and it just keeps going up like that. So every time you shoot it, you're not only using a resource, but you also have the knowledge that it's going to come back even scarier and even more challenging later on. But that revolver also has different utility as well. If you come across a locked door, you can shoot the lock off to get through that door very quickly. The sound, of course, will alert the monster to your presence, so then you've got to hide. And what I like about the bunker, not only the setting and how scary it is to have bombs dropping overhead from the war and you not knowing if the sounds you're hearing are just from the war or from this thing, creeping nearby, is how it kind of breaks video game rules in many ways. We mentioned the idea that you have all of these tools in RE9 Requiem at your disposal, and you can use them in interesting ways if you want. You can use that injector you mentioned to take out the chef. Here, it blows that up even more. So if you come across a locked door in Resident Evil 9 Requiem, you probably have one way to open it. You have to go find a key, or you have to have like a lockpick on you, and you can use that item to unlock the door and get in. Here, if you come across a locked door, you can find the key, you can try to lockpick it, you can grab a brick and smash the door in so you can get by that way. You can shoot the lock off, like I mentioned. In every single one of those has like a pro and a con attached to it, a risk and a reward. So obviously the safest would be finding the key, but what if then you run into the monster? Maybe you want to pick up a brick and smash the door in, but then it's going to take a few swings and you're going to alert the monster to your presence maybe. So you're constantly thinking about all of these different pressures, and the game itself has this soft time limit because the bunker essentially works on power from a generator that you need to find fuel for. So you constantly have to go back to this home base, essentially, to give the bunker power to turn on the lights, which helps keep the monster away. And it just, man, I have maybe never been more anxious playing a game because it just makes... I'm trying to pitch it to you as a fun thing to do, but it's going to stress you out. It stressed me out so much. You're thinking about the time you have left. You're thinking about the monster being around the corner. Do I have enough bullets? Am I making too much noise? Where is the thing that I need? And that puzzle box, I have just found... I've been yearning for that, for a sequel ever since it came out, because it has so many great ideas. Like I said, the way it plays with physics and gets you thinking outside the box from getting away from your video game logic into what would you do in this situation, I think is just absolutely brilliant. And that's from someone who actually didn't really rate the other Amnesia games either and was never a huge fan until this game came around. I just thought it reinvented the wheel so well. And if you, like I said, if you love those grey sections, I feel like this might be right up your street, leaning more on the more hardcore side of things with the difficulty and challenge, but great. Such a great game.
It's so good. I was just going to say, the monster's scared of light like the girlies.
That is also true. That is also true. Yeah. The monster is scared of light. And it also does crawl out of walls. And you do have a little lighter that you can light up in a lamp, and you can flick the switches on.
100%. Like Capcom played the Amnesia the Bunker and went, oh yeah, we can do that. And I love that for them because they did their own take on it. It doesn't feel derivative, but yeah, it's definitely inspired by it. It feels so good. I love Amnesia the Bunker. I'm glad that it's getting shouted out, and I can't believe you said you're not a fan of the other Amnesia games. Leave.
I need to go back and play them is my issue. You know what? I bought the collection about 6 years ago, so I've got all of the other ones that they've made so far, and I don't know, man. I tried to play the original on PC, and maybe that was my issue. Maybe I just didn't vibe with the controls on a big television, with the lights down. Maybe it'll work much more. Maybe I'll do it. Maybe if you make us do an episode on Amnesia, then I'll have to finally play it, won't I? So that'll maybe be the ticket.
It's so good. I do think you would really like it. I think you'd really like Amnesia the Dark Descent, played on the Amnesia collection on PlayStation. Play that, and then play Justine, which is like a DLC version, little add-on thing. It's just like an extra thing in-world. I think you'd really like Justine because the story of it's funny. Like, not funny, it's like, it's just like interesting and a bit different, and it's basically like doing a saw trap. yourself. Like you're the person doing a saw trap. So and once you've played the first one to get like the context of it and the controls and everything, you'll like Justine. Amnesia Machine for Pigs is the Chinese room, so it's completely different in tone and vibe. But I'm pretty sure it's set in Britain actually, and I still think it's super interesting. It's a lot less in your face scary. It's a lot more explore and be spooked out. But the pig motif, I just think pigs are scary, so I think they really played into that nicely. Rebirth is the only one that I don't love, and that's because it went a bit sci-fi mystical realms. And it's still super interesting. It's like being in this like strange version of hell, but I found it a bit too cerebral for what I wanted from an Amnesia game. And then The Bunker came along, and I was like, this is exactly what they should have been making.
This is exactly. Nah, the thing is, I want to go back and play them because on paper they should so be my thing. I love the developers. I love the other games that they've made. I love The Bunker. Yeah. I love Soma. Soma's so good. What a horror game.
We should talk about Soma.
We definitely should talk about Soma at some point. But the Chinese room as well. I love their games. Yeah. So I need to go back and play them because when I played Amnesia The Dark Descent 10, 15 years ago, I was clearly not in the right state of mind to appreciate what it was. So let's find an excuse to play them for another episode.
Yeah, it was a more recent one for me as well that I played, and I really liked it. So it can be done. It can be gone back to and enjoyed as a modern player. I would like to shout out some films. I got 2 films that I think are for fans of Resident Evil Requiem, though they're not particularly niche picks. The first one is Rec, because I think it feels... It's a zombie movie. It's a zombie movie, isn't it? But which does tie in. But actually, Rec 2, when you kind of get the... I don't want to spoil Rec, but the ending events of Rec mean that it's a lot more high stakes in Rec 2, and there's something kind of insurmountable that's around that I think feels very the girl coded, and like the segments of how things can jump out of anywhere. I don't know, I just felt like that claustrophobic found footage vibe with the first person Grace Ashcroft segments in the hospital, especially when the lights go out, and especially like in the isolation wards and things like that. I felt like it made me want to watch Rec. It made me want to watch that. And like the creatures you come up against and how they're kind of posited in Rec as well. I just thought like the through line is a bit thinner than other connected media we've got, but I still think it's one that's worth the shout out. And obviously we love Rec. I'm sure Rec's one of both of our favourite films ever.
Oh yeah. Any excuse to go back to Rec 1 and 2 in particular is fine by me. And like you said, I don't even think it's that much of a tenuous link, because you do have the actual creature designs. You've got the fact that it's all taking place in that one apartment block, very Resident Evil style of going back to safe zones, trying out new wings, coming back, getting overwhelmed. And again, with being as vague as possible, I think, man, the more I watch horror films, the more I play horror games, the ending of Rec 1 and the creature design at the end of Rec 1 has to be like one of the most influential movie monsters in the modern era. Like, everyone's ripped that off, and rightly so, because when the first time I saw that, the first time I got to that ending, what an imprint that left on me. I thought it was the scariest thing that I'd ever seen. It's so well executed.
It's amazing. And I love the kind of way that they build on it in Rec 2 and kind of make it's like, I guess some people complain it's a bit cheesy or campy or whatever. I don't think that's the case. I think that the lore behind this creature, and also in Rec 2 we get the interplay of light as well, which I think ties into the girl really well. I just think the girl is very Rec coded, and the idea behind these things and how they tie together. I just think if you're going to play Resident Evil Requiem and you want something that nails the Rhodes Hill vibes, Rec 1 and 2, what's it called? Marathon? Yeah, I guess it's just back to back. It's 2 films.
Still a marathon,
Yeah.
When you're this old, it feels like a marathon.
Yeah. And in the same vein as that, Grace's section where she has to go into the basement of Rhodes Hill, which we haven't actually spoke about, but Basement of Rhodes Hill is supreme survival horror game making that is The Bunker 101, but it's also barbarian, like super duper barbarian. Like, I was like, okay, here's like, if we're giving like a film for each section, we've got Rec for Rhodes Hill main part, we have Barbarian for basement main part, and then when we get to Leon S. Kennedy and his vibes, it's full Resident Evil movies. Like, genuinely, Mila Jokovic, like, that's where he is. He is in the RE universe, which I think is really fun.
I will say as well, one that I didn't know if I wanted to shout out, because I'm sure at some point we will talk about it more, maybe even do an episode on it, but the Leon sections, when you're in that opening Raccoon City exploratory zone, are so, in the best way possible, The Last of Us Part 2 in terms of the gameplay. Like, even visually, some of the encounters are so evocative of some of the best combat encounters in that game. The way that you explore the city, like I said, the tactility of moving around this urban environment, you know, going from apartment block to apartment block, fighting beasties, unlocking doors. Gameplay wise, even like the excellent animations and the way Leon moves, it reminded me so much in the best possible way of The Last of Us 2, which I think is incredibly underrated when it comes to its gameplay. I love playing that game. I think it feels so good. I think it gets its action and its violence just almost unlike anything else until now. So when you're moving around these streets as Leon, you're taking people out, you're getting covered in blood, you're literally painting this dusty old town red, and you're trying to find items, you're trying to find resources. That gameplay loop is so similar to The Last of Us Part 2 with its own distinct Resident Evil vibes, like we mentioned. But any excuse to talk about The Last of Us Part 2, I will take. And there we go.
Love it. Unfortunately, if we ever do an episode on that, it's just both of us going, it's great, isn't it? It's great, isn't it? It's great, isn't it? Over and over again. But yeah, it is. It's great, isn't it? Like, it's so good.
It's great.
I think also with like Resident Evil Requiem and the blood that we're talking about there, obviously blood is a massive mechanic of like being able to upgrade your weapons and jumping in buckets, that kind of thing. I saw a small reference somebody made to a section in the basement where you kind of get flushed out with all of the blood after the grinder. The grinder section's so good as well. And someone was like, oh, it's like The Descent. And I was like, you know what? Sure. Have it. Like, I love it. Anything that's got a blood pit, it's like The Descent. You're right. You're so right. Let's say it's The Descent.
Yep. When it happened in one of the most recent Tomb Raiders, I was like, wow, that's The Descent. That rules. Yeah. When it happened here, I was like, wow, that's like The Descent. That rules. Just rip that off every time. Anytime, man, you have a hero who emerges from a pool of blood and looks the most badass you've ever seen. Yeah. Fair play. That is a trope you can keep doing over and over again, and I will not get tired of it at all.
Yeah, any monster feeding pit with blood, Descent. Always recommend The Descent.
Dude.
The last little...
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say...
Oh, what's happened?
No, nothing bad. Just we could talk about this game forever, and I want to, because there's so many great moments like that. The implementation of the blood in this game is such a cool twist. Like you said, that injector that you have uses this infected blood, and it explodes the monsters and kills them permanently, like the guy from Blade 1. You know those throwing injectors that Blade has in that film, and then it bursts them like a horrible pimple. It's the best. It is the best. Yeah. It's so good. I've been wanting to see that again for years since watching Blade 1. More games, more films should have exploding injector projectiles that you have.
100%. Blood Rave, Blade 1 as well. I was going to say, if it's got blood in it, it's like the Blood Rave. Obviously, the music's not the same, and it doesn't have vampires, and there's no dancing, but I think it's a bit Blade 1 because there's blood in it.
Definitely.
My final thing, and this actually isn't a recommendation from me, but something I found in an interview with CNET, the director said, it's really great to hear you say that in reference to what the interviewer just said. I don't know why I read that bit out. Anyway, our exact aim was to try and intrigue people who normally don't play Resident Evil games, add some different elements so they might want to play it even if they think it's normally not for them. In addition to the works you just mentioned, the work of David Fincher is something where I try to aim for that mood. You know, the way his movies are shot and that kind of dark atmosphere. So I think you could absolutely jump off the back of that and go like Zodiac and Seven as kind of the detective noir thriller horror vibes just spun out into something a lot more supernatural. But I think that is more a vibe thing than it is a direct influence. At least I say as a player. Obviously the director knows better than me what is influenced his game, but it feels more like a a vibe, an atmosphere that's put into the game and put across the game, rather than something where we're actually seeing, the seven deadly sins played out.
No, I get you. I think with that in particular, it's a strange one because the first trailer was so Fincher coded, was so Seven coded, and the first 20 minutes of this game are so Fincher and Seven coded. The way that they shoot and the way that they have the way that they direct the cinematics of the opening section as Grace, as you're exploring this hotel and you're completely powerless and you have this murderer in a hood who's, suffocating people to death. It has that grindhousey, old school Fincher aesthetic to it. And again, this is just the game in my head. It's not a criticism of the game we got. I would have loved to have seen a little bit more of that as well throughout the game, because it's so well captured in that opening, and then you kind of get the other influences as it goes, but it's so potent within that first prologue section, and it totally makes sense why you would be brought up in terms of influences, because it's like, wow, you can see that a lot in the marketing and in that earlier section.
Yeah, to Resident Evil's to a pro to it and a con to it is it always starts so granular and then blows up to like a world-threatening event, and that's fun. But I think sometimes we don't need the super secret underground lab that's going to threaten the world as we know it in the same way. Like, this was interesting and different and still fun, but like there's always that worldwide threat, whereas I actually think maybe something really, really like Resident Evil 7, where it is literally just, can Ethan survive this up until you get to the boat section, is like, I just think that's where Resident Evil really, really thrives, when it's so personal, and those opening segments being able to do that, definitely really, really good. And 7's like a forever recommend.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, I'd play 7, play it in VR. Have the time of your life. Get stabbed by Mia over and over again in VR. No, I'm with you as well.
No, I meant David Fincher's 7.
Oh, yeah. That's also a great film. I mean, it's not as good as Resident Evil 7, an absolute masterpiece of our times. I'd love to watch 7, David Fincher's 7 in VR, though, as just a complete aside. What the heck was I going to say there, Ash? I can't remember at all. It was something very interesting and smart, I'm sure.
Oh, no.
But I've completely blanked on it now. I want to talk about, just briefly, what you mentioned there about that personal stakes, and I'm really interested if anyone's listening to this or watching this, what they think of that idea of what Resident Evil is. Do you prefer the mad anime-inspired lore of the wackiest games, or do you prefer the more isolated, character-driven stuff from Resident Evil 7? Because I had a moment when you switch to Leon in this game, and it does go big. It does reintroduce dead characters, and you're talking about this secret underground lab under a bombed city, and this potential Elpis, like, biohazard to end all biohazards. And I got real worried. I got real scared that we were going to go too dumb, that we were going to go too silly, we were going to go too big on the stakes. So I loved it when you get to the end and you have all this stuff with Grace being the chosen one, and, she's the key to everything. And it just goes, oh, she's just normal. She's just a normal person, actually, at the end of the day. And Elpis is actually not this new super secret, better than ever bioweapon. It's a antivirus, and the character that's being brought back from the dead, he gets his head chopped off, and we don't have to worry about that. He was just a clone. And man, the joy I felt when all of that stuff was happening was just immense, because it managed to just reframe everything back around the characters that we actually care about and make this what could have been outlandish, cartoonish, world-ending plot actually work from a character perspective. And I really thought they were going to go off the rails with it, and they didn't, and it was great.
That is true. Yeah, to be fair, they did set it up as something else. Then we're like, actually, it's fine. And don't worry about it. But it was very the new trilogy of Star Wars is what it was like setting up to be before they like retconned everything and made it actually no, this is the truth. But yeah, the reveal that Grace is just someone, like, oh right, fine, that's fine. And Spencer was like, yeah, actually I felt a bit bad about doing the whole Resident Evil thing originally, so I made a fix. Yeah, I do think the way that they end is really fun, and it's one of the like Resident Evil games, maybe only one, please correct me if I'm wrong, where you pick your ending. You can have a good or bad ending. Obviously, there's a canon one and a bad one.
Yeah, the outright ending. You get like the choice in Resi 7 between who to save, but it doesn't affect much. Here it's like, okay, you get a good ending and a bad ending. Speaking of, which ending did you get first?
Oh man, I tried to pick the bad ending, so I released Elpis because I was like, haha. And I just obviously hadn't been paying attention. I was like, aha, I'm gonna kill everyone because all the baddies want me to do it. And then it was like, you saved the day and everyone's happy and everyone's fixed and it's great. And I was like, oh well, okay, fine. It wasn't what I was aiming for, but
no,
sure.
I wanted Leon to get shot in the head. Actually,
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I wanted to see how far they go with it. I love it when a horror game shows you the worst possible outcome and goes, "How do you feel about that then? What are you gonna do with that? How bleak can this go?" Like I always want to push the limit of what a horror creative is willing to put out there. I want to see what they've done, how weird they've got. Like Callisto Protocol, trying to find every death animation in it was like my favorite thing to do, because it's like, how freaky are you gonna get? What we gonna do here? Show me. So yeah, I accidentally got the good ending. I assume you got the good ending on purpose.
I did. Though I went back immediately, of course, and got the bad ending. Yeah. And I think I would have been a little bit annoyed if I got the bad ending first, because in that one, it's kind of a non-ending. Like, Grace leaves, you don't get the final boss, Leon gets killed, and that's a great scene. I do love that scene where Leon gets shot, but you then pretty much have to instantly reload and just do the ending again. And I think if that was the way that it went out for me first time, it might have broke the pacing a little bit. I'd have been, I wish it was more definitively a choice and not just a proper ending and a fun one, I guess, on top of
a little
things.
Dead end. Yeah.
A little dead end, yeah.
No, I think that's very fair. And speaking of the end of the game, we should end our podcast here because we've gone on a jumbo rant this time. It's been 2 hours of recording, so
they're only going to get longer, it seems. Yep, there we go. Let's wrap this up. We didn't talk about half the game, but for a future episode, I'm sure we'll end up talking about it as well. No doubt.
It's so hard because obviously there's 20 hours of Resident Evil Requiem to talk about, so being able to boil that down to this section and then the things it's influenced by or that we feel connected to, and then our opinions on all the things that happen in it, I do think it's a bit of a bumper episode. But yeah, hey, hopefully that's appreciated by, if anybody's listening or watching, if anybody's out there. This is our first episode we've done since actually releasing the podcast as well, which is exciting. So
it is exciting, scary. Thank you so much for actually caring. I didn't expect anyone to care, Ash. And then when we shared it and we launched it, everyone was so nice and it was so welcoming and so kind. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was really lovely.
Really, really lovely. And we have a Patreon, which we've set up as well, which you can use to generally support the podcast or get access to a little Discord. It's very chill at the moment. There's just a few of us. We can just hang out and talk about stuff. And you get early access to the episodes as well. So if you want to listen a day early, you can get it on a Thursday rather than a Friday, get it set up for your weekend, listen to us yabber and have the warm, fuzzy feeling of supporting the show. You can subscribe to our Patreon over at That's Sick. All of our links will be in the description. But there's no pressure to do that. We're literally just hanging out, having a chat. We love putting this together. Obviously, thank you so much for listening anyway. That is amazing support. I do want to shout out our two patrons on our higher tier, which is Donnie Sturges and Todd. So thank you so much for being here and supporting us in that way too, my Discord chums. And yeah, that is kind of our little shout out for the shilling part of the episode.
Hey, no, I'm just pleased we got something to shill. Thank you guys so much for supporting us directly on the Patreon, and thank everyone for listening or watching or sharing. It really helps. If you want to give us a rating on Spotify or Apple, that also really helps. Like the video, comment on the video. It pains me to do this, but you got to do it. I'm sorry. You got to shill the products at some point. But yeah, like Ash said, we do this regardless. I was away. And I missed doing it. I really did. I kept thinking, it's going to be really nice to get back and do a podcast again. Because we launched it and then immediately took a break. And we haven't done anything that sick related for a few weeks now. But now we are back, baby. And I'm excited for whatever we choose to do next week because we haven't got that locked down for the first time ever.
I know, it's actually your choice now. So, because we just do it on we pick one each week. At some point, I will be introducing mailbag episodes where we'll do comments and questions, and I will be introducing you guys pick what we do as well. But for now, yeah, we're just going slow. We're doing what works without overdoing anything. So those things will come, and I will let you know when they do, obviously, in the podcast. But for now, thank you so much for being here. We're gonna go. I'm gonna let Josh leave work. So he's got into an office to record this on his day off. So I'll free him. But
this
yeah,
is how
dedicated
dedicated I am to the That Sick project, Ash. And here, it's just me and the cleaners. That's all it is. Me and the cleaners having a great time. But no, yeah, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure as always.
Yeah, right. We'll catch you guys in 2 weeks' time when the next That Sick episode comes out. Maybe we'll do them more frequently soon as well. Like I said, there's all sorts of ideas in the air. But we'll be back in 2 weeks' time with a fresh episode of Spooky Media. Please check out the show description / the YouTube description in general for any of our links, where to find us, where to find more from the show, how to support us, all that stuff, blah, 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 blah. And we'll see you again soon. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Josh. Goodbye.
Thank you, Ash. Goodbye.